So I'll be continuing my previously started API topic only. So I'll quickly give a briefer about what we saw before. So we understood what an API is and why it came about and what its uses are and stuff like that. And after that, we actually looked at the type of APIs and how to connect to open APIs and what open APIs are. So we actually saw how to connect to two instances of open APIs. So one was the Open Weather API, in which we were able to actually look at the weather of I think Chennai. We looked at the weather of Chennai, and Marvel API. We were able to look at all the main characters which Marvel has in their comics. So these were two examples of the Open API. So now we'll actually look at the business models a lot of the API producers use, and we'll also so that will be the main thing, the types of the API providers, and we'll look at the business models API providers use. So the other stuff we'll actually look at other in the next upcoming KCast sessions. First, let me start with what are the types of business APIs. So there are mainly 4 types of business APIs. So the first type is where the API is actually the product, and the second type is where the API projects the project. Third, the API promotes the project. In the fourth and final one, the API powers and feeds the product. So these are the 4 types of APIs which are commonly present in the business world. So we'll actually deep dive into each one of these APIs, and we'll look at some examples and what they do and how they're different, all of that in the upcoming slides. So first, we'll look at how these APIs actually get their revenues. So we looked at 4 types of APIs, right? So the first 2 usually get direct revenue, and the second 2 actually get an indirect form of revenue. So when we talk about direct revenues, so direct revenue is when the API is the product and it projects the product. So when we get direct revenues, the customer experience, the only customer experience is through the API or a third-party API, third party using the API. So, and the people who are being billed will be the end user, the customer, or a partner who actually supplies it to the customer. So we'll be directly billing the customer or the distributor or partner who actually gives it to the customer, final customer. And when we talk about indirect revenues, the other 2 types, the APIs which promote the product and the APIs which powers the product. So when the API actually promotes the product, we can't simply build the API itself, because our main objective is to sell our product, not the API. The API is something which comes along with the product. So in this kind of a model, the API actually plays a supporting role. So it won't be the main product. It's a secondary line or something like that, which actually supports the main product which you have. So usually there's no building relationship at all, because the API is not the most important thing. We don't actually bill for the API service. So the return on investment we get from the API can't be measured by simply looking at the revenue, for example. We won't be getting a particular revenue associated with the API alone. So we'll have to look at the product metrics. So for example, if we are giving an service, a main service, and this API is helping us, so what is the incremental return we get for this product? So if we are spending X amount of money for building this API, and if we receive a higher percentage of customers because of this API's presence, or if the customers reactions and how they feel about this API, if that is positive, even that is a kind of a metric which actually increases the customer's happiness, or it increases the bond with the customer and our company. So that is how we'll actually measure the ROI when the APIs are of these 2 types. So now we'll first look at the first type, when the API is actually the product. So when the API is actually the product, the core value is tied up in the API only. So one example for that will be Amazon Web Services. So there to actually we look at two things now for each of the four types of APIs. One will be the strategy they use to increase the ecosystem's penetration and the market base. The other one will be how the revenue of the product can actually grow, the API can actually grow. So the strategy these kinds of APIs use is actually they'll try to directly increase the customer usage. They'll encourage resellers and build up they'll build up technology around this particular APIs. This will encourage other third-party tools also and new services also. So using all this, they're able to actually increase the diffusion of the product and capture a much larger market scale. So market space. So when this happens, their revenue grows by it's proportional to directly the number of users. So the revenue growth is dependent totally on the usage growth. So these are actually a few examples of where the API is the product. One of the most important examples is AWS, and in most of these cases, the customer is actually the developer only. So when it comes to AWS and all, usually the developers are the people who use it. The end customer is itself the developer only. So all these services like Twilio, which is related to messaging, Stripe, which is related to email marketing and stuff. All these people are actually all these people actually target the developer as the customer. Next, we look at the second type. So this type is actually where the API projects the product. So what this API does is it extends the availability of functionalities to new places. So Salesforce is an example here. So Salesforce actually gives an API which allows us to access all the data easily. So within the company also, we can easily access all the interdepartment data, or the company can give it to third-party users to actually report the data or look at the data and analyze the data. So here, Salesforce's API projects the product. So because the API, Salesforce has an API, people usually like that also. So because of that, they might choose Salesforce versus another third-party CRM. So the strategy they use to build up the ecosystem is they'll cultivate a partner ecosystem. So they'll bring in a lot of partnerships. For example, they'll partner with Tableau, for example, or other third-party companies, which actually increases their hold on the market. They'll also build up switching costs. So if someone starts with Salesforce and they have to migrate to a secondary to a different ecosystem, for example, they will actually put in a very large be a lot of hidden costs and time consuming. I'm sorry, am I audible? I think my connection is...
Sanjay, we lost you around a couple of seconds.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible now.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I think there's some issue with my network. Yeah. So I was talking about the strategies and I was talking about the switching costs. So you were able to hear that, right?
You just started with switching costs and then we lost you.
Okay, yeah. So the switching costs can be either monetary or just time. So they might put an imposition of some X dollars if you want to switch from their company to other, or it will take a lot of time for you to actually set up all the required fields and data and all this stuff when you migrate to a new ecosystem. And this itself will prevent the customer from actually switching from Salesforce to another company. So there are both direct switching costs and hidden switching costs also. So even if you don't like the service as much as you did when you started, you don't have a choice. You're actually stuck with it for a very long time. So that's one of the strategies they use. And another common thing which all these APIs use is they encourage a lot of third-party tools, because that will actually decrease the R&D work they have to do, and it will also bring in a variety of ideas. So if you have a particular CEO or or a COO, they'll have a particular type of thought process, and there won't be a lot of diversity in what they actually want to achieve or what they're trying to do with the product. But when third-party people are involved, you'll get a wide array of ideas and applications which actually come up from third-party tools. So the way the revenue grows in this type of an API is by increasing the customer spend. So they'll keep adding on small things. They'll make us pay extra for that, or increase the number of customers for the product. So the obvious proportionality with the number of customers. The next one is when the API promotes the actual product. So here the API is a secondary function, and it only has indirect revenue impact. So examples for this will be Amazon and Netflix. Amazon, for example, they will actually have an API for giving ads for their products. So your website, for example, if you have a blog which actually writes about some tech stuff, and if you use Amazon's API and actually place ads which are relevant to your users in your website, Amazon will give you a cut. So Amazon actually uses this API to promote its product. So that's how it indirectly increases its traffic and revenue. Netflix also does a similar thing. So for example, if you've seen Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, you'll see there are teasers or trailers on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and stuff. So that teasers will actually have a direct link to Netflix. So this will actually drive Netflix's traffic and revenue also. So this is the main reason why these companies have APIs like this. Their strategy will be to distribute teaser information and diffuse their brand better. So, and this will promote your product to particular niches. So Amazon product, they'll target tech products in one website, and food related products in another website and stuff. So they'll have access to particular sections of the market, and it will also improve the partner's impact. So the secondary blog will have a better impact on actually redirecting this traffic, rather than Amazon itself posting ads on Google, for example. This will have a better impact. Similar to the previous one, increasing the number of customers and the spend on the core product. So last one was we simply increase the spend on the API, but here we are aiming to increase the spend and customers on the core product. So that's the main difference. So the final model is actually when the API powers and feeds the product. So we actually do content acquisition via the API. So examples for this will be Twitter and YouTube. So similar to the previous one, it will diffuse the brand better, and it will facilitate access, and it will also leverage social networks. So Facebook, for example, has a lot of YouTube videos which are embedded in it. Twitter also, Twitter gives APIs for us to actually. So if you have actually seen some news platforms like, for example, India Today, for example, when they publish this online content, they'll always embed tweets and stuff inside the news article, right? So they use APIs for that, for embedding those Twitter tweets and stuff inside the news materials. So this via this strategy, Twitter actually leverages this social networks and news networks to increase its traffic and its brand recognition. So what this does is it makes Twitter the go-to place for social media interactions when it comes to news, for example. So that's the main reason why these companies actually have APIs which feeds their product. So how they grow their revenue is by getting more user-generated content and bringing in more people and brand recognition to their product via using these third-party companies or networks, for example. So now that we have actually looked at all the main types of APIs, we look at the business models they use. So there are a lot of business models. So I'll go through a few today, and I'll maybe continue in the next session. I don't think we'll be able to cover all of them today. So when it comes to business models, there are a lot of business models. First, we'll talk about the free business model, and for this, we'll look at Facebook Like API. So if you have noticed, all the websites we see will have a like button, which is embedded into the web page, right? So this like button actually is given by Facebook's API. So people will be able to like the website's Facebook page instantly from their website itself, or even a news article or a blog. It can be liked within the blog or the new website. So what this does actually for Facebook is that they don't actually charge anything for this. It makes and promotes Facebook in this field of technology, and it also makes it a dominant force. So whenever someone wants to make their brand more recognizable, the only thing they'll be thinking about is how they need to increase their likes for their Facebook page, for example. So they won't be thinking about how do I, for example, I'm taking an outdated example. They won't be thinking about MySpace now, because this is very easy for them to do, and the number of people who are using it also is more. So a few figures which we see is that these are a little outdated figures. There are about 2.7 billion likes every day, and more than 2.5 million websites, third-party websites, actually use the Facebook like button. And every day, almost 1,000 websites add the Facebook like button within their website. So the second model which we'll be talking about is where the developer pays the API. So we look at the free model, but many APIs actually try to generate revenue by making developers pay. So there are mainly 5 types in this. The first one will be pay as you go. AWS is a very good example. So in pay as you go, the monthly, they don't have any clear plan. It depends on how much you're using. So the more you use, the more you will pay. So it's very flexible in its very nature. Sorry, I think I'm getting an echo. Yeah, now it's better. The second type we'll be looking at will be the tiered plans. So for example, if you use the product, if you use the API to perform maybe some 1,000 calls, there'll be a particular price. For 10,000 calls, there'll be some second price, and more than 10,000, there'll be a higher price. So that's the tiered way of payment. The next will be freemium. So in freemium, it's a mixture of both paid and free. So if you're a small scale developer, or if you're just starting out, the company, to entice you, will actually give it free for a limited amount of calls. So as your company grows, what happens is that you're already sucked into the ecosystem, and you're almost certainly forced to actually continue with this company and pay a premium for a higher amount of calls, for example, higher amount of calls. The next is the unit-based approach. So Google AdWords famously uses this. So for a particular number of clicks or a particular number of actions, Google will actually charge you a fee. And the final one is the one which a lot of payment portals and payment authorization portals like PayPal, JustPay, Razorpay, all these people use. So they take a percentage of the fee as a transaction fees. So similar to what credit cards do. Credit cards charge anywhere between 1 to 2% as a transaction fee, right? Similarly, to do online transactions, PayPal, JustPay, Razorpay, all these people actually take a cut around 1 to 2%. So this is the final model which people actually use. I think we'll stop here, because if I get started, I think I won't be able to cover the other stuff. Just to maybe, I wanted to cover something else a little interesting. not fully related with this, but related to APIs. I'll just talk about that and we'll end this session with this. Okay. So if you had been listening to the news, there was a very important Supreme Court ruling in the US in the case of Google versus Oracle. So the Supreme Court of the US Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of Google in the case between Google and Oracle. Has anyone heard about this? Like, I would like to know your opinions or something like that. Has anyone actually heard about this case? Okay, so yeah, I guess no. So the case was that so Oracle actually owns the Java system, right? So the Java ecosystem. So Google, what it did was when it came up with its Android ecosystem, it used a lot of the core essence of the Java ecosystem. And because of this, Oracle actually wanted a copyright act on it, and they wanted to sue Google for infringement. So this case has been going on for a long time, and recently the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of Google. So what they told is that just because a company uses the core, similar core to what you use, you cannot take an IPR, intellectual property right, for that very base. If the company is implementing it in a different way, you can't simply get a copyright for that and stop the whole ecosystem or the whole idea to actually propagate. So that was the main reason why they actually ruled in favor of Google, and this had a lot of implications. So if the Supreme Court had actually ruled in favor of Oracle, what would have happened is that almost all the open source software we get, all that will be under copyright to a third party. And one of the most famous examples of this, what would have happened is, we all know Linux, right? The free OS we use. So Linux will actually come under copyright for Unix. So Linux is based slightly on Unix. And what would have happened if the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Oracle would be that we would have all lost Linux as a whole. So this was something which was interesting related to the Java API. And yeah, we'll end with that.